Hello, American Crochet Association. Salena here, founder, host, lead educator with the ACA. I've got a chat that I wanted to have with you guys today. So if you are watching live, come on over, say hey, say hello, tell me where you're viewing from. As long as I'm here live, I'll give you an extra special shout out. And if you're viewing this on the replay, don't fret. It's still the same great jam. And I hope that there's some, there's some goodies in here that will help to make your crochet life better. Now, this is a topic that I wrote an article about years ago, but it's an oldie and a goodie. I mentioned that I revamped it in my last Mingle Monday, and I really it was just kind of a mention. So I wanted to have this chat just because I thought that this really just kind of needs its own conversation. So I just wanted to have a more lengthy chat. These are recommendations from a crochet professional. Hopefully these are 3 crochet tools that will give you a better crochet life because they have certainly given me a better crochet life. So what I'm going to do here is I am linking this article, and that way after you watch the live or, replay, however you're viewing this, you guys can come on over here and check out this article for yourself. You can save it for later. You can pin it. There's even something cool that you can download and print that you may super duper love. Okay. So, the reason I wrote this article is that, I actually don't have a lot of crochet tools. Yes, I've been crocheting literally in my entire life, like since I was a very small child. I had this really minimalist perspective of, I have this yarn, I have these 3 crochet hooks, I don't need anything else. Like, that's it. I can crochet with these things just fine. I've been doing it my entire life. I don't need anything. So I am definitely not a gadget person. I am not a tool person. It's really hard for me to even introduce new things into my crochet life. So I wrote this article because there were a few things that really just disrupted my thinking about the tools that I use to crochet, and they literally helped transform my crochet life. So it's really just kind of about, there's a little bit of my story in here, but there really are some awesome tools in here to use. So the first tool that I want to tell you guys about are stitch markers. And if you followed me for 5 minutes or longer, you will know that Salena Baca always, 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 always uses stitch markers and always preaches that everyone should use stitch markers. Now, there's lots of different things you can use stitch markers for, but really, arguably, you should be using them in every single project that you create, whether you're working in rounds, whether you're working in rows. It doesn't matter how simple or complex the design is. They just make so much sense. So in this particular article, I don't go into great depth in terms of all the different uses you could be using stitch markers for, but I do have a link. So if you want to learn more about stitch markers and how to use them, definitely click on this link in the article. Now, when it comes to stitch markers, I'm not trying to sell you on any one particular fancy kind of stitch marker. You can use whatever you want in terms of stitch marking ability. As a matter of fact, my very favorite kind of stitch marker are bobby pins. Yes, literally the ones that you get in the hair aisle. I got mine at Target a couple years ago. I got a little case and a pack of like 150 or something like that for like $4. Perfect. I love those stitch markers. I love that they're really easy to insert and take out, and they don't really get in the way, but whatever works for you. Now, the reason I say that these really disrupted my crochet life in a good way, disrupted my thinking and just made me a better crocheter. About, I don't know, maybe 8, 9 years ago, something like that, I was really having a lot of trouble sometimes when I was reading patterns, discerning like what counts as a stitch and what doesn't, especially with a project that had a lot of stitches. Maybe I was making a blanket and had 100 stitches or something like that. Maybe I was working something in joined rounds. Maybe it was a tote bag and it had 200 stitches. I don't know, but I'm talking lots of stitches, like unreasonable to count every single stitch before you stop a row or before you join to go, do I have enough or do I not have enough? Do I have enough or do I not have enough? And I felt like there were a few projects to where I'm like, man, I know how to crochet, I know how to count my stitches. Why is this thing that I'm making that's supposed to have straight ends? Why am I adding or omitting stitches? Why is it that whenever I'm working in joined rounds, it's hard for me to really sometimes figure out where I join in the round? So a friend of mine gave me some tips about what counts as a stitch and what doesn't count as a stitch. Most importantly, how to mark the top of the first stitch in every row or every round. And when you do that, when you're working back over that row or whenever you're joining that round, you've already marked the top of your first stitch so you know exactly where to join. That has been such a lifesaver for me. And just that alone has made such a huge difference in my crochet life. In addition to that, another thing that I love to use stitch markers for is when I have a project that has lots of different rows and they all kind of look the same, and I need to count how many I have, but I'm paying attention to something else, so I'm only kind of paying attention. I like to use a stitch marker to put at the end of maybe every 10th row or something like that. So if I'm making a blanket and it needs 150 rows, then every 10 rows I place that stitch marker, and then I can just count my stitch markers and know how many rows I have without having to recount all of them. So just little things like that have really just helped me to reclaim my sanity, and they've made a real difference in my crochet life to where I feel like I'm actually crocheting better. So that is tool number one. Again, you can use whatever you want for a stitch marker. If you are currently using stitch markers, I'd love to hear in the comments what your favorite stitch marker is. And if you're not using them, you are living dangerously, my friend, and I am telling you, you need to stop all of your crochet work. Do not pick up your hook again until you use stitch markers. I promise you it'll make a huge difference. All right, before I move on, I see a lot of you guys are here, so I just wanted to pause for a minute to say hey to everyone, like Cassandra. So good to see you. Thanks for checking in from North Carolina. Hello, June Marshall. So good to see you. Monica Mercado is here. Hello, my friend. So good to see you. Loretta is here. Hey there, hey there. So good to see you. Dottie is here. Hello, Dottie. Good to see you too. Loretta, she's just so friendly saying hey to everyone here. Hello, Loretta. Thank you for being here. Margaret is here from Mississippi, and Cassandra's also friendly saying hey to everybody too. All right, guys, I've got 2 more tools that I want to get through. But again, if you are watching live, come on over, say hey, say hello, tell me where you're viewing from. If you guys have any questions, comments, feedback on the topic today, just let me know as soon as I get to it. As soon as I see it, I will get to it, I promise. Okay, lots of information about stitch markers. Yes, I do have some shopping links if you want to check some out. But there you have it, my friends. Okay, now tool number 2, you guys can already see it. It's a yarn winder. And I cannot reiterate enough that, again, I am not a tool person to where I had yarn remnants and I'm like, you know, I'll just leave them as remnants or I'll wind them up by hand. It's fine. I don't need a yarn winder. Like that's just, it's a waste. I don't need it. A few of my friends had yarn winders and they were raving about them. And I was still like, nope, not convinced, not using it. And a friend of mine just was like, you know what? I'm just going to get you one. It's a gift. Sent me one. And I was so reluctant. I was like, oh, fine, I guess I'll try it because it's a gift and, you know, set it up. And at first I just had some, you know, I used to work from really big, well, I still do work from really big skeins of yarn, like Red Heart with Love or something like that, to where it's a big skein and, you know, you work with maybe a little bit of it and you still have so much of the skein left, but because it's hollow, it's very floppy and it's very messy. So I had a lot of skeins like that. And I was like, well, let me just start with these and let me just kind of wind a few up. And I wound up a few yarn remnants. And I started making these yarn cakes and I realized a few things. First and foremost, yarn cakes, 100 times better than yarn balls. So much better. As a matter of fact, if I don't have a lot of yarn, if that ball is going to be my fist or smaller, it's still going to be a ball. It's fine. But if that yarn remnant is going to create a cake or a ball the size of my fist or larger, I'm going to wind that on my yarn winder right here. And the reason is that the cake of yarn is such a nice unit to work from. Whenever you're winding up a ball with your hand, you have one yarn end that you can work from, and that's the outside yarn end. And what I realized was that, you know, I have a ball of yarn this big, I can only work from the outside. So what happens is that ball of yarn is just kind of getting thrashed everywhere, which is really difficult to work from. I was always tugging it, and it was just really uncomfortable to work from this really big ball of yarn. So what do? You get a yarn bowl and you put it in that. It's still, you know, it's just not as comfortable because you're constantly tugging on something. The weight of this ball makes you have to tug from it. And it's just a really uncomfortable experience. Also, I have pets. They all are long hair, black hair animals, and that long black hair really shows up in yarn. So if I'm dealing with this big yarn bowl that's kind of going everywhere, it's going to pick up random cat and dog hair everywhere, and it just is not a fun time. But another thing that I noticed whenever I was winding up yarn balls by hand is that there are sometimes whenever you're winding and you're going very fast, you're winding your yarn tight. And what that does is whenever you're tightening that yarn and you're winding it, it's stretching the yarn. So something that I didn't realize I was doing, I mean, I realized it, but I didn't fully at the time, but I didn't fully realize it until I started making yarn cakes, was that when I was winding up that yarn by hand and making these big yarn balls, it was stretching the yarn and actually degrading the yarn. So when I went back to use it, it felt stretched. It felt like it just didn't have that soft, supple, like pliability that it had before. So it just really felt very damaged. So it wasn't until I started winding up my yarn with cakes that I was like, huh, this is not pulling that tension that the yarn balls do. So it's actually helping my yarn to maintain, like, you know, the integrity of the yarn and like the fluffiness and the bounciness. And also yarn cakes, you can stack them up, which is really, you know, kind of a nice, fun way to store your yarn, because balls, they don't stack. You have to kind of lay them all flat. You know, they can get messy. So just, you know, whenever it comes to storing between the two, I'll take cakes over balls anytime. I touched on this before, but it's definitely worth noting. When you're winding yarn by hand and it's a ball, you have that center yarn in this, or you have that beginning yarn in the center of your ball, and then you've got the working tail end. You're going to be working from the outside in, and that's what's making that yarn ball thrash around. Whenever you make a yarn cake, it's giving you both yarn tails. So there's the beginning tail in the center, which I recommend working from, because it, you know, then the yarn cake isn't going to be thrashing around because you're not pulling from the outside. But you also have access to the outside. So maybe you just need a little bit of yarn, or, you know, you're working on a small project and you kind of want to keep the integrity of the cake. You can absolutely work from either one. So let me go back to my story, because it's kind of funny. When I got my yarn winder and I reluctantly set it up and I reluctantly started winding a few skeins, partial skeins, I literally spent hours. I was obsessed. It was like the most fun thing I'd ever done. It felt like I was on vacation. Laugh at me, you will. But if you don't know, you don't know. You've never used a yarn winder. I actually wound up like anything that I possibly could that was, if it was not already in like a perfect unit of yarn, it got wound into a cake. I mean, I just had so much fun winding it up. So if you have a lot of yarn, if you have a lot of yarn remnants, if you want a better way to manage the yarn that you have, I mean, for the cost, it's really just, I think it can't be beat. Now that I've used a yarn winder, I cannot do without it. I would not do without it. If my yarn winder broke today, I would get another one today. That's how much of a difference it's made in my life. So I couldn't actually find the link to this particular one. Again, my friend got it for me, but I did find one better for you guys on Amazon. The brand is Knit Picks. It has tons of excellent reviews, and it's actually the #1 bestseller on Amazon. So for all of those reasons and for the amazing price, I definitely linked that for you guys. So if you've ever used a yarn winder, let me know. Let me know your thoughts. If you guys are not yet sold on using a yarn winder, let me know what questions you have. I mean, again, I am not a tool person, but this is definitely something I would not do without. Absolutely not. All right, let's see who else is here and what you guys are saying. It looks like Carol is here from California. Good to see you, Carol. Dottie says, I use the stitch marker that locks. Yep, those are definitely some cool ones that you can use. Dottie is here from Pennsylvania. So good to see you. Margaret, bobby pins work fine, but if you want to be fancy, I use large lobster claw clasps and attach a bead. Yeah, so many different people will make their own stitch markers, and they use fancy beads and things like that. And on that note, I will say one of the most clever uses of stitch markers that I've seen are, and I'll get more on this subject to you guys in just a minute, but whenever you've got a project that you're putting down for later, you know, typically we leave our crochet hook in our work, right? But if you're not going to come back to your project for a really long time, you might want to use a stitch marker and put that on the loop, and then you can, you know, use your crochet hook for other things. It doesn't get lost with the project. So the clever thing that I've seen is people do make their stitch markers and they put letters, little letter beads on the markers. And that way, maybe you're using an H hook for a project. You get your stitch marker with the H bead and you put it there. And that way, you know what crochet hook. My cat is talking to you guys. That way you guys know what crochet hook to use for that project. So many different uses for the stitch markers. Hello, Shaheen from Sacramento, California. Good to see you. Cassandra makes her own stitch markers. Share some pictures, especially over in our community. I'd love to see what you make. I'd love to see what they look like. Carol, yes, the best yarn cakes. Absolutely. These yarn winders make fantastic yarn cakes. And if you don't know about yarn cakes, you guys are missing out. I'm telling you. Absolutely telling you. Margaret, cakes are better for stacking and organizing. Absolutely. Margaret also says, hi, originally from San Francisco. Love Sacramento. Dottie loves the yarn winder. Cassandra loves my yarn ball winder. Or loves her yarn ball winder. Loretta, yarn winder sounds interesting. Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a lot of yarn, maybe you're like, I mean, I don't have a lot of yarn. I don't have a lot of yarn remnants. You may just kind of look at this and go, I'm not sure I'd really use it. You might actually buy a lot of hanks of yarn. I don't buy a lot of hanks, but I certainly use them enough that the yarn winder really comes in handy. So I have a yarn winder and a Swift, because you cannot work from a hank of yarn. Don't try it. That is not a dare. I'm not daring anyone. Like, you can't do it. I'm telling you, it's not worth it. So if you buy hanks of yarn, it's definitely worth it to invest in a Swift. The Swift opens up, it holds the hank of yarn, and then you use the yarn winder to transform that hank into the cake. So lots of fantastic uses. Absolutely. All right, guys. So I've got one more tool that if you don't do anything else, definitely do this. It will absolutely make your crochet life better. I've got lots of fun stories for you too, okay? But before we get to that, I just wanted to say, if you are not convinced that the yarn winder will make a huge difference in your life, or if you have one, you're like, I don't know how to use this thing. I was there too. I did not know how to use mine. It looked complicated. So I figured it out and I made a video tutorial with some helpful tips. So that should absolutely help to get you started. All right. Okay, guys, so the third tool on my list of crochet tools that will make a huge difference in your life, it will give you a better crochet life, I promise you. I'm going to call it the WIP Notecard, so the Work in Progress note card. Now, this is not my idea. It's actually a friend of mine came up with this idea a few years ago. I don't know how she came up with this brilliant idea, but it is brilliant. It's amazing, and it has really made a huge difference in my crochet life. So I actually am the type of person to where I have 10 different WIPs going on at any one time. I have lots of WIPs going on. I get bored with projects easy, or I have lots of projects that I have different deadlines on, or I get inspired and I want to make something new. So at any one given time, I have like 10 projects going on, if not more. So I came across a problem a couple years ago, and that was that I was losing my crochet hooks. I couldn't find them. I didn't know where they were. And I was buying some nice fancy crochet hooks, like the polymer clay hooks, the fancy ones that you get on Etsy. I mean, I was investing in these tools and they were disappearing and I couldn't figure it out. And one day I was cleaning out my yarn closet and I found my projects and I was like, oh yeah, I don't really have a whole lot of projects. Let me kind of pull these out. It was my perception that I didn't have a lot of projects, but I started pulling out these project bags and I had like 15, 18. I mean, I had a lot of projects. And what I was doing was I was working through a project and I was leaving my yarn and leaving, my hook and everything that I needed for that project in the bag. And I was putting it away and going, I'll be right back. But I mean, months had gone by for some of these and I'd clearly forgotten that was just kind of this bad habit that I adopted. So my crochet hooks and all of these projects were just kind of, in the dark somewhere, and I'd pull them out And a lot of times I really wasn't, I didn't really fully remember what I was making. You know, oh, I think I'm following a pattern for this, but was it on somebody's website? Was it on Ravelry? Is it in a book? Where did I find this thing? Or, you know, I mean, this wasn't my problem, but it certainly can be a problem. If you don't store your hooks with your crochet project, you may not remember what hook you used. And if gauge is crucial or size is crucial or fabric is crucial, you may guess and go, yeah, I think it's an H, but maybe it was an I. So your fabric starts getting really a whole lot more dense and a whole lot smaller than it's supposed to be, or vice versa. So I was losing my crochet hooks, but I was also not really remembering much about the projects that I was, you know, kind of just leaving off to the side. So a friend of mine told me about this WIP note card, and you guys can print it, you can save it, you can use it for, you can, you know, come up with your own version of this. But we made it look like an actual note card. Hold on one second. Here we go. We made it look like an actual note card like this. So you can actually get note cards and just do that. But again, you can print this or save it for later, whatever you need to do. But what I like about this note card is that this stays with your project that's unfinished. And you're going to put details on this that may seem pretty simple, but you'd be amazed at how much you forget once you're not looking at a project for a week or 2 weeks or a month or two or something like that. So just putting things like pattern name, pattern location, yarn brand, yarn color, hook size, pattern size, date started, and then any kind of notes that you have. Those I thought were the most helpful little pointers to have on a WIP note card. And again, this stays with your project. So you may also be like me and keep notebooks on the things that you make, and I certainly do that as well. But the thing about my crochet notebooks is that I may have one notebook and it's for all of the crochet things that I make in a given year or something like that. So I want to make sure that all of my notes stay with the project until the project is finished. So yeah, keep your notebook, make your notes, all of that kind of stuff. You can still keep that, but I think that this stays with the project until it's done. And when it is done, then you can take this note card and put it in your notebook. And that way you're still keeping a notebook and you still have a WIP note card, and they're both serving a really good purpose. So I find that whenever I use this particular note card, whenever I go back to my project, I do have all the details that I need. And that way I can just kind of pick up where I've left off. And it makes me feel so much better about completing the project. Side note, another thing that I think this is really helpful for is that I've actually found projects that I haven't touched in a really long time. So having this WIP note card, especially with the date started here, it helps me to decide, should I frog this project? Am I going to come back to it? Or should I just let it go? Is this not something, you know, because really I started this 6 months ago. And I'm not inspired to start working on it today. So should this yarn be better suited for something else? So for all of those reasons, that's why this particular note card has worked really well, just to kind of, you know, make me feel less frazzled with the projects that I make. All right, everybody, let's see who else is here. Those are all 3 of my projects. And that was everything that I wanted to say about them. Cassandra loves her yarn ball winder. Loretta says yarn winder sounds interesting. Tammy, love the WIP note card. Makes a huge difference for remembering what you are doing. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, just remembering where the pattern is. I mean, maybe you're getting back to your project and you're like, yeah, I'm ready to get started, but I follow like 10 different blogs and I get emails and I'm on Pinterest and I'm on Ravelry. I mean, where did I find this pattern? So just, you know, noting, oh, wait a minute. No, I found it in a book. I mean, there have been so many times I thought a pattern was in a certain place and it totally wasn't. It drove me crazy. And I wasted a lot of time looking for a pattern that I swore was on a site that was not on a site, or swore it was in a book when it was not in a book. So really great information here. All right, last comment that I see is from Carol. Carol says, thanks for sharing. My pleasure, Carol. All right, guys. So again, I had a little bit of a chat on this topic on Monday. This is an old topic. I've given a few conversations on this in the past. It is certainly not a new topic, but I recently revamped this topic just to have a little bit more information, kind of share some of my stories on each of these. And I would really love to hear what you guys think. Is there a crochet tool besides your yarn and your hook that you use that you just can't live without, that you think makes a huge difference? I'd love to hear. So just kind of continue that conversation here in the comments. Also, if there are any of these tools that you guys use, the stitch markers, the yarn winder, the WIP Notecard, I'd love to hear. So share your experience with these and let us know what you think, okay? And again, if there's a tool that you love that you can't live without, I'd love to see what it is. All right, everybody. If you enjoyed this talk, do me a favor, just like this video and tag a crochet friend in the comments if you think this will make a difference in their life. And if you really enjoyed this and you thought it was awesome and you think other people will find it's awesome, just share this video in at least one place where you enjoy crochet. All right, everybody. Peace, love, crochet. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.